All right, so you wanted to do kind of a continuation of our conversation on Micro-SaaS today, and I'll let you take it away because I want to hear what your thoughts are, why you wanted to come back to this.
Yeah, I mean, we did this episode, for those of you who listened, about Micro-SaaS and how it's a thing right now. And I've noticed in the last week especially that everywhere I look, people are talking about Micro-SaaS. And in fact, it's like you go to YouTube and that's kind of proving ground for what's coming up right now as far as AI technology and how do you make $1 million by buying $20 a month app and et cetera. And I don't say that facetiously. There are people making a lot of money by buying a $20 a month app and making use of it in the right way. So the question is, if you have, say, 100,000 coders or I won't say coders, I'll say micro-SaaS developers who are churning out 100,000 apps every month, well, when is this going to be not the cool thing to do anymore? And so, my question to myself was like, okay, is this something that's just going to become so saturated that it's all going to crash and burn? And my thought is yes and no. The yes part is, obviously, if there are 100,000 apps coming out a month, micro-SaaS apps, you're going to need something special to cut through the noise. But at the same time, I think a good idea is a good idea. And it may be that part of the shakeup is that a developer might combine 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 20 micro apps into a more robust platform. But again, I think there will be a shakeout, but there will be survivors. And I think it's something that'll be with us.
So this is where my sense of overwhelm comes from when it comes to this topic, I think, because I am the type of person who has 10 windows and 50 tabs open on my computer right now. And at one point had probably 200 or 300 apps on my phone. And I've narrowed that down to what I only really need because, those times are over. But it seems there's similar potential for micro SaaS products to kind of go down the same route of there are so many tools out there and some tools that perform quite similar functions to one another and which one is the best. But also how do you centralize what you really need and harness that in a way where things aren't all over the place. And as HubSpot partners, obviously that's a big thing that we like to talk about is that single source of truth, whether it's HubSpot or another software that you've chosen, finding a way to centralize your business operations into one platform is really important. So I'm kind of curious how some of the micro SaaS products that we've been looking at, Peter, have the potential to fit into that model in hopefully the near future. I know that there are a number of awesome apps, for instance, on the HubSpot app marketplace, but I know we've also been looking at tools like Replit, Lovable. We talked about Card the other day. Bolt was another one that you brought up earlier today that I think is interesting. So yeah, these are all tools where it's like, which one do you dig into first? Which one is going to offer the most value to your business? That's where my head's at.
All right, that's a good place for it to be at. So, but before we dig into it a little bit more, I have to say that only 50 tabs open in your browser, that's like, how in the world did you get it down to 50 tabs?
That's 50 tabs per window, just to be clear.
Okay, there you go. All right, that's better. Yeah, so, I think that's a great subject. And I don't even remember what platform I tried first, but I tried one of the AI website builders a few months ago, and I sort of ran screaming from the room because I wasn't impressed. Actually, I ran bored from the room, but nevertheless, that's another story. But, like many things in AI, I think it's important to look at the failures. It may be in some ways more important to look what appears to be a failure than an overnight success, because a lot of the failures are just, they're learning. They're learning and they're getting better. And oftentimes, as we saw with ChatGPT, there are a couple updates that just made such significant changes that it brought a whole new value to ChatGPT and other LLMs are very similar. So, I think Bolt is an interesting one. That seems to be the hottest right now as far as people paying attention to it. One of the things that intrigues me is that they now can import Figma design files and build a website off of that in Bolt. And that's actually my plan for the weekend. I have lots of Figma files. Some of them are websites in progress. Some of them have been built a long time ago, but I'm going to try to, and landing pages too. And I'm going to experiment around with building some of those in Bolt and see what happens.
So I'm curious because any article that I've read within the past month talking about Micro-SaaS has mentioned at least one website builder. There are dozens out there, if not more. Why do you think that's one of the most common forms of Micro-SaaS that's really making waves right now?
Well, I think in a way it's part of this new sort of Flash ecosystem. People are building these Micro-SaaS products and they need to get a website up like today. And so that's my best guess right now. And I think it'll spread out into a more general population.
I am very interested, though, in not just website builders, but some of the Micro-SaaS tools that are focused on app creation. I've been playing around with some of those, and I am not a very savvy person when it comes to that kind of stuff. And even now with a few of some of the newer updates with various no-code app solutions, I think it's getting much more intuitive and super fast. So I think that's an interesting niche to look at is, again, thinking about this idea of expansion. Not only are there all these tools on the market now that have specific functionalities, but they're kind of creating openings for businesses and individuals to set up their own very specific apps for a functionality that might really only be necessary or applicable to one person or one business model.
Absolutely. And that's the whole point is, agentic AI can fulfill that. And as far as like people like us, we're a HubSpot agency. And so we've done so many things manually for so long. And now a lot of those things can be automated. And so our goal is to not automate it for somebody, but to actually build the agent or agents that get them what they need, and there they are.
And to build the infrastructure to have that functioning within your CRM too. I think super important right now with the tendency for things to really unfurl,
Technically, it's not going to function in your CRM, but it'll appear to function in your CRM.
This is true.
Agent AI, you were involved in building the book chooser agent, right? Or was that?
That was not me, but that was a really, really fun one. Yeah. I think someone on our team, 2 or 3 members of our team, came up with the idea to create an agent with Agent AI that asks you a few simple questions about your reading interests. I think it was like, what was the last book you read? What's your favorite book of all time? What genres are you interested in? What's something you would never want to read? And it takes that and gives you a recommendation for your next book. I think you could also pull in like your Goodreads rating so it could kind of get a feel for what resonated with you and what not. So that was really fun. That's a fun one. And I think a lot of us on the team have been playing around with that ever since.
Yeah, no, it was great and really just such an eye-opener for a lot of the team at that point, which has been a while ago now, of just how easy it is to make something that's useful. And this is this is something that you could come back to anytime. Not going to change the world necessarily.
No, but you know what? There are opportunities to create agents with Agent AI that do have more professionally applicable functionalities with a very similar setup to something simple like suggest me a book. So definitely something to play around with if you're interested in making something silly like that, or if you have a pain point and you're curious how a tool like Agent AI could potentially solve it in a very straightforward way with no coding.
And for those who aren't familiar, Agent.ai is a pet project of Dharmesh Shah, the co-founder of HubSpot, the technical end of the HubSpot original partnership. And it's free. It's free to use. You can learned to build basic agents probably, essentially in 15 minutes. And, a great thing to go and just play around with. So, Grace, is it fair to say we sort of jumped around a little bit in this episode?
I think we have. Like I said, there's a lot going on. But we'll be back next week with other things to check in on. Thanks for your time today, Peter. Talk to you next week.
Bye.